brother and sister, you don't fit in. And you've known that for a long time. Even when you were young, something about you just didn't blend with the crowd. You could be in a room full of people laughing, talking, going through the motions. But inside, something always felt different. It's not that you were better than anyone. It's not pride. It's that deep, quiet pull that tells you, this isn't home. You tried to go along with the flow. You tried to talk the way they talked, dress the way they dressed, live the way they lived. But there was a check in your spirit, a tension in your soul. Every time you tried to conform, it felt like you were putting on someone else's clothes. It never fit. When God marks you, he separates you. And that separation is not always external, it's internal. You can smile, you can show up, you can do what everyone else does. But inside, you know you're not wired like them. You don't enjoy what they enjoy. What satisfies others leaves you empty. What they call fun feels like compromise to you. What they chase, you walk away from. And sometimes, if you're honest, you hate that feeling. You wish you could just be like everybody else. You wish you could fit into the rhythm of the world without always feeling like an outsider. But that discontentment isn't a flaw. It's a signal. It's God's way of reminding you that you've been set apart. You were never meant to blend in. You weren't created to be normal. God didn't put you on this earth to be a copy of culture. He put you here to be a carrier of his presence. And when you're carrying something sacred, the world will never fully embrace you. They might respect you, they might admire you from a distance, but they'll never truly understand you. That's because what's on you didn't come from them. The call of God has a way of isolating you, not because he wants to punish you, but because he wants to preserve you. When God is preparing to use someone, he first pulls them away. He pulls them away from distractions. He pulls them away from harmful voices. He pulls them away from influences that would distort the purpose inside them. And if you've ever wondered why you've lost people, why certain friendships died, why certain doors didn't open, it's because God was doing more in your life than you realized. He wasn't trying to reject you. He was trying to refine you. The anointing attracts isolation. Look through scripture and you'll see it over and over again. Joseph had a dream, and his brothers couldn't stand him for it. David was chosen by God, but overlooked by his own father. Jeremiah was marked to be a prophet, but he was hated for the words he spoke. Even Jesus himself, he was without sin, full of love, healing multitudes, and they still rejected him. That's because when heaven marks you, earth doesn't always know what to do with you. And maybe that's you. You've tried to connect. You've tried to fit the mold. You've tried to downplay your convictions to gain the approval of others. But every time you do, you feel like something inside you dies a little. That's because you weren't made for the crowd. You were made for the call. The more you try to fit in, the more God will make you stand out. He didn't mark you so you could blend in. He marked you so you could lead out. You're not called to mimic culture. You're called to transform it. You faced unusual warfare, and not just the everyday kind of trouble that everyone goes through. No. What you've been through has been intense, specific, and often unexplained. There are battles you've fought that don't make sense when you try to line them up with your natural circumstances. You've walked through storms that came out of nowhere. You've experienced opposition that wasn't logical. The level of resistance you face doesn't match your visible position. And that's because the attack has never been about where you are. It's about where you're going. When you're marked by God, the enemy takes notice. Before you ever step into your assignment, before you ever touch the microphone, before you ever lead the ministry, start the business, speak the word, build the vision, the enemy sees the oil. He recognizes the favor. He senses the authority that you haven't even discovered yet. That's why you've been under fire. That's why you've experienced pushback from people who don't even really know you. That's why you've been hit in seasons when you were just trying to survive. Because it's not about you. It's about the mantle you carry. It's about the purpose you were born to fulfill. Spiritual warfare doesn't always show up with flashing lights and dramatic signs. Sometimes it looks like discouragement that won't lift. Sometimes it feels like isolation that suffocates. Sometimes it shows up as relentless attacks on your mind, your health, your family, your peace. You've had moments when you felt like giving up, and you didn't even know why. There were days you woke up with a heaviness you couldn't explain. People around you thought you were fine, but they didn't see the invisible battle raging in your spirit. That's because this warfare isn't happening on the surface. It's happening in the unseen realm. The enemy doesn't waste weapons on people who pose no threat. He invests his attacks where he sees divine potential. You're not under attack because you're weak. You're under attack because you're dangerous. If you ever step fully into what God created you for, hell knows there will be damage. The enemy sees that if you ever rise, you'll break chains. If you ever speak, you'll shift atmospheres. If you ever walk in your full authority, you'll become a threat to darkness. Sometimes the warfare increases right before your breakthrough. It intensifies when you're on the verge of stepping into something greater. That's not the time to run. That's not the time to shrink back. That's the time to stand firm. Because what you're feeling isn't just pressure. It's birth pains. You're carrying something. You're not just living. You're laboring. And labor is messy. Labor is painful. But labor produces new life. You've faced betrayal that cut deep. Attacks on your identity. Losses that you didn't see coming. But through it all, something in you wouldn't let go. Even when you wanted to quit, you didn't. Even when you couldn't feel God, you kept showing up. That's evidence of the mark. That's proof that what's in you is greater than what's against you. The enemy tried to crush you, but all he did was reveal that you're uncrushable. What you've walked through isn't random. The battles you faced are connected to your assignment. The pressure you've felt is connected to your purpose. And the warfare you've endured is confirmation that the enemy sees what's on your life. He wouldn't fight you like this if you weren't carrying something powerful. He wouldn't oppose you this way if you weren't anointed. You feel a divine restlessness. It's not anxiety. It's not discontentment rooted in comparison. It's a stirring deep in your spirit that you can't fully explain. You wake up with this sense that something is shifting. You go about your day. You meet your responsibilities, but underneath the surface, there's this holy dissatisfaction that keeps growing. You're grateful for what God has done, but you know there's more. You're not ungrateful. You're unsettled, because when God marks you, He also moves you. And sometimes, before He moves you externally, He begins moving you internally. That restlessness is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something is changing. It's a divine signal that your current season is not your final destination. You feel it in your prayer life. You feel it in your worship. You feel it in your conversations. The things that used to satisfy you now seem shallow. The circles you once felt comfortable in now feel too small. The routines that used to bring peace now feel confining. That's because God is expanding you from the inside out. He's stretching your spirit to match the assignment that's ahead. When you're marked by God, you can't settle. You can't go back to normal. You can't pretend like you don't hear the whisper calling you deeper. Others might be content doing just enough, living for the weekend, chasing comfort. But you can't, because you know that you were created for more than survival. You were made for impact. You were made to carry something eternal. And no matter how hard you try to blend in, that divine stirring won't let you. It pulls you when you're tired. It wakes you up in the middle of the night. It disrupts your plans. It interrupts your comfort. Because God is trying to get your attention. Restlessness is often the precursor to revelation. Before God gives you new direction, He first makes you uncomfortable where you are. That discomfort is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to push you into her calling. Sometimes God won't allow the old season to satisfy you because you'll never leave it unless you become restless enough to grow. He'll close doors. He'll dry up resources. He'll shift relationships, not to punish you, but to position you. That unsettled feeling is God breaking up the ground around your roots so that you can grow taller, stretch wider, and reach higher. There's a difference between human ambition and divine restlessness. Ambition chases success for self-glory. Restlessness chases purpose for kingdom impact. When you're marked by God, your spirit won't let you rest in mediocrity. You can't stay where it's comfortable. You can't ignore what you were born to do. You know too much. You've seen too much. You've heard too much in the spirit to live like nothing is happening. Something is rising. Something is shifting. And the restlessness you feel is proof that God is preparing you for it. Others might call it impatience. They might say you're unsettled or unstable. But what they don't realize is that you've seen glimpses of what's coming. You've caught the scent of purpose in the air. And once you've had a taste of destiny, nothing else will satisfy. That divine restlessness is heaven's way of pulling you out of comfort into calling. It's a holy irritation that won't let you sit still while you're called to walk on water. You feel it every time you try to shrink back. You feel it every time you try to stay quiet when God tells you to speak. You feel it when you try to be ordinary while knowing you've been anointed for the extraordinary. You've been through the fire, but you're still standing. You've walked through seasons that should have broken you. You've faced situations that had every intention of destroying your faith, your hope, your peace, and even your identity. There were moments when you didn't think you'd make it out. Moments when the weight was so heavy, you couldn't breathe. Times when the tears fell and no one saw them. Nights when you cried out to God in silence because you didn't have the words. And yet, here you are. Not because everything went your way. Not because the path was easy. But because God kept you when nothing else could. The fire you went through wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It was refining you. It was shaping you. It was burning off what couldn't go with you into your next season. When God marks someone, He allows them to walk through flames that others don't have to face. Not to harm them, but to prepare them. Because the level of fire often matches the level of favor. You don't get the oil without the crushing. You don't get the anointing without the fire. And the greater the call, the hotter the furnace. There's something about fire that reveals what's real. It strips away what's fake. It exposes what can't last. When you go through the fire, your priorities change. What used to matter doesn't anymore. You stop caring about applause. You stop chasing approval. The fire makes you focus on what's eternal. It purifies your motives. It kills your pride. It teaches you to depend on God like never before. When you've walked through fire and you're still standing, there's a strength in you that can't be explained. It's not natural. It's supernatural. It's the strength that comes from being sustained by grace when nothing else made sense. The fire not only reveals what's inside you, it exposes what's around you. Some people left you when the flames got hot. Some who promised to stay walked away when things fell apart. And that hurt. But it also clarified. Because now you know who's really for you. Now you know who's willing to walk with you through the valley. Not just celebrate with you on the mountain. The fire revealed who was assigned to your destiny and who was only attached to your comfort. And even in the loneliness, God was there. When everyone else walked out, He stepped in. When the flames rose higher, His presence got closer. Sometimes God doesn't put out the fire. He joins you in it. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you went into the furnace expecting death, but came out not even smelling like smoke. You came out with your mind still intact. You came out with your worship stronger. You came out with a testimony that no one can argue with. Because when you've been through the fire and you're still praising, still believing, still moving forward, that's evidence that God's hand is on your life. You've learned how to walk when it hurt. You've learned how to praise when it didn't make sense. You've learned how to trust God when all the signs said give up. And that kind of faith isn't learned on the mountaintop. That kind of endurance is frigid in the fire. You carry a quiet authority now. You don't shout like you used to. You don't need to prove anything to anyone because you know what you've survived. You know what you've been through. And you know that if the fire couldn't break you, nothing else will. You have a heart for things others ignore. While the world chases status, position, and popularity, your heart breaks for the broken. You notice the ones who are overlooked. You feel the weight of people's pain even when they don't say a word. You're drawn to the hurting, the lonely, the forgotten. When others rush past them, you stop. When others scroll past stories of injustice or tragedy, something inside you won't let you move on. You carry a burden that doesn't make sense to everyone else, But it makes perfect sense to heaven. Because when God marks you, he doesn't just give you a platform. He gives you his heart. It's not just empathy. It's spiritual sensitivity. You can be in a room full of people and still sense who's suffering in silence. You can see beyond the smile. You can hear what's not being said. You're not content with surface level living. You want to go deeper. You want to reach the ones who've been pushed aside. There's a call inside you that says, leave the 99 and go after the one. And that's not weakness. It's evidence of the mark. Because only those who carry the heart of the shepherd will feel that kind of pull. It costs you something to care this deeply. It makes life heavier at times. You cry over things others laugh at. You pray for people who wouldn't even remember your name. You carry burdens in the secret place that no one else sees. You've wept in intercession. You've felt the groaning of the Spirit. You've experienced the ache of compassion that keeps you up at night. That's not random emotion. That's the evidence of divine assignment. That's God sharing his burden with you. That's heaven trusting you with a piece of its heart. This world teaches us to look out for ourselves, to build our brand, to seek recognition. But when you're marked by God, that's not enough. You long to see lives changed. You long to see chains broken. You long to see people restored. There's something in you that refuses to turn a blind eye to suffering. You feel responsible to make a difference. And you don't need a title to do it. You don't need a stage. You don't need applause. You just want to be faithful. You just want to be obedient. Because to you, people are not projects. They're souls. And eternity is always on your mind. That kind of compassion doesn't come from human effort. It comes from the Holy Spirit. It's a divine compassion that moves you to act, that stirs you to speak, that drives you to give. You don't just notice needs. You meet them. You don't just pray for change. You become the change. While others are waiting for someone else to fix it, you've already stepped in. You've already picked up the phone, written the check, served the meal, offered the prayer. That's what happens when you're marked. You don't just talk about the gospel. And sometimes that level of compassion feels like a curse because you feel everything. You carry more than your share. You pour out until you're empty. But that's when God steps in. He refills you. He renews your strength. He reminds you that your tears are not wasted. He reminds you that your labor is not in vain. Heaven sees what others miss. Heaven hears what others ignore. Heaven values what the world overlooks. When God marks someone, he gives them a heart that mirrors his own. And that heart doesn't chase applause. It chases the one who's been left behind. That heart doesn't settle for looking successful. It burns to make an eternal impact. That heart doesn't grow cold in a world that's indifferent. It stays soft, open, and ready to respond whenever God says go. Doors open that you didn't knock on. Opportunities have found you that you didn't chase. Favor has come to you in ways you couldn't explain. You've been invited into rooms you didn't apply for. You've been connected to people you never networked for. You've had moments in your life where you looked around and knew without a doubt, this was God. Not because you manipulated it, not because you forced it, but because he went ahead of you and made a way where there was none. That's what happens when you're marked by God. The doors that open are not based on your resume. They're based on your assignment. When God marks you, he opens doors no man can shut. And he shuts doors no man can open. It doesn't matter who tries to block you. It doesn't matter what's said about you. It doesn't matter how underqualified you feel. When his hand is on your life, he will elevate you in seasons where you're only trying to survive. People will try to understand it, try to explain it, try to figure it out. But the truth is, it's not logic, it's favor. It's not skill alone, it's grace. It's not connection, it's calling. You've seen moments where things align too perfectly to be coincidence, where timing worked out so specifically it had to be divine, where doors swung wide at just the right moment, even though you weren't even looking for them. That's the evidence of God's providence. He's not just opening doors for your convenience. He's positioning you for purpose. He's not responding to your plans. He's unfolding his. And when it's his plan, no amount of striving can improve it, and no amount of sabotage can stop it. It humbles you because you know you didn't make it happen. You look back and realize, I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the most prepared. I didn't have the resources, but somehow I got through. That's the signature of God on a life. He does things in a way that makes sure he gets the glory. He lets you walk through doors that leave no room for pride. He places you in positions that reflect his sovereignty, not your strategy. Because when you're marked, elevation doesn't come from hustle. It comes from obedience. You may have watched others try to force their way into rooms. They fight, they push, they promote themselves, but nothing seems to last. That's because when man opens the door, man gets the credit. But when God opens the door, he protects the access, sustains the position, and empowers the assignment. That's why you've been able to do what you've done. That's why you've thrived in places you didn't train for. Because God's been behind the scenes the whole time. There's a peace that comes when you know you didn't have to manipulate your way forward. You didn't have to compromise. You didn't have to sell out. You didn't have to pretend to be something you're not. You just stayed faithful, and God brought the opportunity to your feet. You didn't knock on it, but it opened. You didn't chase it, but it found you. You didn't force it, but you walked into it. That's divine alignment. And even now, you might be in a season where it feels like nothing is opening. You've been faithful. You've been consistent. You've said yes to God, but the doors still seem shut. That doesn't mean he's forgotten. It means he's still preparing. Because when the door he has for you opens, it won't just be for a moment. It'll be for a mission. It won't just elevate you. It will advance the kingdom. And when you walk through it, you'll know it wasn't your hand that turned the knob. It was God's hand, his timing, his purpose, his plan.